New York Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had this to say on government spending amid the debt limit debate. Let's watch.
Not only that, but they are accusing Democrats of saying we spend too much. For anyone that wants to entertain that thought, I ask you to think about the last time a person has said in this country that the government does too much for them, that their Social Security check was too high, that teachers are paid too much. When was the last time anyone has heard or seen that?
Almost time's expired.
I think she got the messaging right there. I think that's exactly what people think when they think about public spending. They're like, how can this figure be so high? I don't see any of that. I see our government failing to deliver public goods as promised. Our education system's not very good. Our bridges are crumbling. It doesn't seem like the public dollars we have are spent well, and that makes people less willing to pay their taxes, of course. They're like, what am I paying into? People like paying their taxes when they see the benefit of what those public dollars go to. So I think she makes some really good points here. And I think the argument on the other side is just, we're not doing a good job spending the public budget as is, which kind of feeds into the hand of Kevin McCarthy's case. And of course, it's a bad argument because Kevin McCarthy's like, well, it's fine if we keep these tax cuts for people with private jets and we keep these tax cuts for these billionaires. And we have to really change, our budget priorities, but we're not going to touch military spending. We're going to cut food stamps and popular programs that people really like retirement. But I think there is a case to be made for we need actually more public spending on some public goods.
I think the spending doesn't have to be higher. It needs to be more efficient. Because to your point, these bureaucratic programs don't do a good job of actually getting the funds to the people who need it. So much of it gets wrapped up in the actual bureaucratic system. And I think people would feel a lot better about government helping them if they were actually seeing the fruits of their taxpayer dollars. But I don't buy AOC's framing that people are saying that they have never said that they want less government intervention. There's a reason why Ronald Reagan's axiom about the scariest words in the English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help" was so popular. And it's because it appeals to this libertarian impulse among American people just because of the nature of the founding of our country and the idea that we are supposed to rely on government for things like a basic social safety net and public safety, but beyond that, we kind of want to be left alone. And just off the top of my head, when I think of things that I would like the government to do less of that affects my life, I would like the government to not be trying to criminalize parents for protesting at school board meetings. I would like the government to not be going after pro-life activists who dare to stand outside of abortion clinics. I would like the government to not add on to my mortgage interest rate because my fiance and I did the right thing by building up our credit scores so that people who have crappy credit scores can get a lower interest rate. That's not how that's supposed to work. I would like that the government didn't try to constantly take away my firearms that I have a Second Amendment right to have. So there's plenty of cases in my life where I see what the government is not doing for me, but what the government is doing to me, and I'd like them to leave me alone.
Yeah, I think if we take away the public good proportion of the government, what do we have left? Okay, we have a military, we have a police, we have the enforcement of laws and a system of punishment. That nobody wants that. Everybody thinks
I want
that
a system of punishment.
Well, the reason that I think many people like a government is because it is how we pool our resources together to have things that make our society function, like roads to drive on, like having schools. She talks about education in that speech. And what's really at the heart of this is so many people have said, well, the government doesn't deliver public goods effectively right now, so maybe we don't fund them at all. That leaves us in a terrible situation. That's like saying we have hospitals that function for profit and don't always do a good job giving the best care to their patients, so let's just get rid of hospitals. I just can't do the zero-sum thinking. And I think AOC hits the nail on the head with this speech by saying, we haven't heard this from the public. The public doesn't have a problem with public spending in the same way you're making it seem like they do. So what do? We raise the debt limit now, we fund the budget as it was legislated, and then maybe we actually do our jobs and address some of the concerns you brought up about the bureaucracy being ineffective. How much work that could be done by public employees is currently outsourced to contractors with the Deloitte Public and Government Service Consulting Division? Is that a good use of our resources to pay people fresh out of public policy programs in grad school to do the work that should be done by the government? I just think there's a lot wrong with how things work right now, and using the debt limit to have some kind of game of chicken to relitigate a prior budget is just a bad use of our time and resources also.
I do think that there should be a separate conversation in Congress about how to reform so many of these programs so that they're done more effectively, which I think would probably save money anyway. So you would basically kill two birds with one stone. And one of the problems with the reason these bureaucracies are so inefficient is it's so difficult to fire federal employees. And I'm not saying we should go through and just, en masse get rid of every member of the federal government. But there's no question that there are people who sit on a keyboard all day working in some faceless building and never actually do any real work. And in any other type of scenario, if you basically had a title and no actual responsibility, you would be let go. And so I think it's important for us to make sure that the people who we're hiring and giving massive benefits to for a lifetime of service working for our federal government are actually serving the people that they're supposed to.
This is actually a huge problem. So many folks will get a job in a department of like a state, right? Like the Department of Justice, whatever. And they won't receive the same training that maybe someone fresh out of school would when it comes to, okay, we have all of these data on inmates. How do we make sense of this? How do we assess our budget effectively? When you have someone who's 55 years old, doesn't know how to use Excel, let alone any kind of coding software, and they're responsible for data on all of the inmates in Rhode Island State, that's a problem. That creates the condition for now we actually have to pay consultants to do this because our current staff can't, and we don't have the budget to hire more people who are new. So what's the solution there? We invest in more training of our state employees. We teach the old guys how to use Excel. Like, it's not complicated,
right.
But it's overlooked because so many people that are also taking public salaries that are in the state legislature, in state congresses, and in the U.S. Congress, they're not paying attention to these issues. Why? Because it's much more sexy to go on television and talk about the debt limit than to actually do your job.
Yeah, and it used to be the case that we had all of these think tanks that would focus their efforts into dealing with the nitty-gritty of how to reform these systems and offering white papers to Congress so that they didn't actually have to do this research themselves. And now most of the think tanks are hyper-concentrated in DC. They are incredibly partisan, and they focus on basically trying to get media attention to get more donors as opposed to actually doing the work that they might have done 20, 30 years ago for helping direct Congress on how to do these things. And that's not to say every think tank is like that, and I know that they do beneficial things too, like the Heritage Foundation is currently getting together an entire staffing database for 2024 if a Republican were to win the presidency so that they can immediately fill all of these vacant positions, because Trump, during his 4 years, had tons of open staffing slots because he, I guess, didn't think he was going to win, and so he didn't have that list of names. But yeah, it just seems like, Congress, to be fair, can't focus on every issue at the same time and doesn't have the resources to do that. They only have so many staff members. They only have so many hours in the day, although they do leave work really early on Fridays, which I think is BS. But somebody has to be doing the wonky stuff too, right? It can't all just be what's the grabby quote on television so that I can get reelected.
Yeah. I fall on both sides of this, right? I used to work in policy research in academia, but I also grew up working class and I'm the first person in my household to go to college. So I can see both sides of this, where it's like, you want to find solutions to problems in our society. That's very noble. Thank you for your life's work. But if your language is not accessible to the people, what's the actual impact of your work? If you write these great white papers and you give them to members of Congress who can't communicate them, maybe they don't even understand the language in the white papers themselves, no matter how simplified it is. If they can't communicate them, and moreover they're paid by lobbyists to do the exact opposite, what's the effectiveness of your job at that point? Like, folks who are in academia, who are potentially doing really good policy research work, need to really invest in reaching everyday people, the electorate in America. It's a big crisis in American politics. So that wraps us up for today.
That was super fun, Jessica. It was great to be with you in person.
I know, and in our matching uniforms here in the flesh. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. So we'll see you next time.